Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Fortnite shotgun! This is being used as a prop in an upcoming video. I've never played Fortnite. I have no idea if it's good or not. I just know it's something that the children's apparently play. This is a pretty neat little design, but if you know anything about guns, that's an obvious Remington 870 receiver. Also, why is it mirrored? But I use this with some cosplay stuff. I was planning on using a real shotgun in one video as a prop, but YouTube probably doesn't like that, so I thought, why not use my prop shotgun? I actually use this with my Sith Trooper cosplay, because it looks cool. I will say this, though. While many modern games and movies are kind of crap, they usually get the art design down right. I mean, Disney Star Wars is terrible by any metric, but I gotta say, Mando's design is pretty great, as is that Sith Trooper design, as it's sort of a fusion of Clone Trooper and Stormtrooper. So yeah, you might be wondering why I haven't done a live stream in a while, and that's for a number of reasons. Most notably, there was a hurricane that blew through Houston in early July. It knocked the power out for the entire city, and it stayed out until it went out on a Monday. It stayed out for me until a Sunday. Oh yes. It was not a fun week, I can tell you that. Eventually I gave up and went to a motel, but all the motels around the Houston area completely booked up. I had to run to Aggieland to find me a motel to stay in. And I stayed in that for like 3 nights because the power wasn't on until I went on a Saturday. The power wasn't back on until the Sunday. Oh, that is not fun. I gotta tell you, I don't know how people live without air conditioning in like other countries or even other parts of the U.S. It's like, I was dying, man. It's just bad. So now I'm kind of trying to make up for all that lost time. Thankfully, now that we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the General Lotz reboot, I'm glad I rebooted the channel because I can get out videos a lot faster, and it's a lot more fun, too. And so even though I lost a whole week, I'm still not going to be behind when July comes about. I'm going to have 2 videos already uploaded to the channel and ready to post by the time August comes about. Speaking of August, there's going to be 4 videos. Battle tanks, the Doom mod Final Carnage, and a big-ass video on Doom 3, because it's turning 20. Holy crap, ladies and gentlemen. And also there's going to be a review of the Doom 3 duology, which is 2 novels of adequate quality. Basically, it's supposed to be a trilogy, but the 3rd book got canned, so the writer kind of had to hurry up and finish his stuff, meaning there was an entirely irrelevant subplot that just kind of went nowhere. It's a subplot about deep-sea researchers. It's like, what does that have to do with Doom 3 again? That's the biggest problem with the Doom 3 novels. There's not enough Doom 3 in it. And they really stretched that plot pretty thin. 2024 has been a very interesting year. When I heard that Donald John Trump was almost assassinated, I actually, once again, was dealing with the power outage. So I was just getting situated in the hotel room, and a friend of mine who doesn't even live in the U.S. sent me a message saying, oh yeah, look at this video. And I was like, I don't care about no Trump video. And it's like, well, no, he was almost assassinated. I was like, what the fuck? Needless to say, that was a very surprising thing to a certain extent. I mean, with all the insane rhetoric that's been going on since 2016, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it actually happened, but I'm not surprised. I'm surprised there was someone dumb enough to try it, but considering how insane the rhetoric's been, it was bound to happen at some point. Now, I'm not going to touch on the conspiracy stuff because I don't want my channel shadow banned. There's plenty of channels much bigger than mine that talk about what went on. Needless to say, the state is all. All is the state. Everything within the state, nothing outside the state or against the state. Darth Vader is my god. But anyway, so yeah, that was pretty weird. And then there's, the fact that Joseph Robinette Biden dropped out of the race. So this is shaping up to be the most interesting election of my lifetime. Now, I'm somebody who has gotten a bit old. I'm 35, so I've been around for a little while, and I can tell you every election is always supposedly the last election. It's always quite amusing, to me at least, whenever I hear people talking about how they used to be this or that, or on this or that political side. It's like, well, all the information was already there. Did it take you that long to read it, or did you just not care? And most people just didn't care. It wasn't until, like about 2015 or 16 that the political rhetoric got so insane that people started actually waking up and realizing how bad it was. But I, for one, remember the before times when people on both sides would call out the excesses of their respective parties. I remember the Daily Show before Jon Stewart, I think his name is, sold out badly, when he would call out his own political party, most notably his own political party illegally spied upon donors for the other political party. Oh dears! That got memory hold pretty fast, didn't it? It's actually quite fascinating to look at political discourse today versus when I was younger, because social media is all pervasive. It was getting there when I was in my early 20s, but it's fully there now. Like, you can't escape social media. And so, it's made things a lot crazier. The fact that you have, Rudy Tardy Oswald trying to take down a presidential candidate, that's something that intellectually I knew it could happen, but, I guess you could say emotionally I didn't think it would. But yeah, the stuff that's happening now didn't come out of nowhere. Especially the DEI stuff, that was already going on in the 90s. I didn't actually know about that until I was studying some primary source documents. And it's like, that was going on even back then? What the hell? So yeah, definitely going to be a hell of a rest of the year. I don't know. I just hope the bloody power stays on. Goddamn Centerpoint. So, moving on from current events, we've got... Actually, no, we're not moving on from current events. We're going back to that power outage, because I gotta tell you, prepping is kind of seen as a bad thing, a stupid thing, or, it's not considered that great, but you need to prep. There's a difference between prepping and hoarding. Hoarding is where you have, a giant pallet of canned food that's gonna go bad in 3 years. Prepping is where you have plenty of batteries, plenty of fuel for your generator, but within reason. Like, you don't have 1,000-gallon tank buried in your backyard. You have, maybe 12 to 20 gallons of, say, propane or something. Prepping is very important, because what happens when the power goes out? We don't even have to talk about zombie apocalypses, boogaloos, none of that. What happens when a hurricane hits, the entire city's out of power, stores aren't open? Also, here's a life pro tip. I don't care where you live, even if you live in a foreign country, have at least a couple hundred in cash. I know that's hard to do these days because of how bad the economy is, cost of living crisis is, whatever, but trust me, find that money. Don't get a coffee or whatever, because I'm telling you, when that grid is down, people will not take credit cards. They will take cash. And so if you need food, ice, fuel, whatever, you need cash to purchase it with. And if you ain't got cash, you ain't got shit. And so here's that hurricane right now. I am usually prepared for this stuff, but less than 2 months before, there had already been a massive power outage that lasted days. Because, screw you, Centerpoint. Apparently they do the minimum of maintenance, but that's it. That's all they do. That's all they'll do. And that's why trees come down, power goes out, and it's out for days. Houston, 4th largest metro in the bloody country, and we can't even have a reliable electric grid. But anyway, I'm not bitter. But yeah, the power's out. The power's out for 6 days. Now remember, there's no zombie apocalypse. There's no boogaloo. It's just the power's down. What are you gonna do? I couldn't do hardly anything at first because I hadn't refilled my fuel supply. I'm glad we had some ice at least. But what happens when that fuel supply runs out? I had about half a cylinder of propane, which is roughly 2 gallons of propane. That lasted about 6 hours, and then I was out. And not one store had propane, which meant every single piece of food in that refrigerator went bad. And it also meant that all the ice melted. Oh dear. No stores are open. You can't get ice. You can't get shit. Well, thankfully, the next day we were able to get some propenes, and we were able to start getting ice. But it was not fun because, you have what you have when the disaster happens. So what you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is when you prep, make sure you refill your supplies within a timely manner, because you don't know if that disaster is going to happen 6 years from now or 6 days from now. Now, once again, don't go overboard. You don't need 1,000-gallon propane tank in the backyard. You just need to have some basic preparations, because more likely it's not going to be a boog, it's not going to be an apocalypse, it's going to be you have a shit tier power company and you're out of power for a while. Now, one thing I do recommend, though, is be reasonable. And if you need to bug out, which is what I did. I bugged out after 6 days, said screw it, and went to a hotel. Now, you may not be able to do that if you don't have the money for it. I also recommend, just making basic preparations. You don't necessarily need to have a pallet of batteries, but make sure you have plenty of batteries for lanterns and stuff like that. If you can have a standalone freezer, get one, because those things will more than pay for themselves. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, prepping is a good idea. So here's my basic recommendations. Number one, have some cash. At least a couple $100. That way, when nobody's taking credit cards, you can still buy basic provisions. Number two, have plenty of fuel for your generator. Now, plenty of fuel doesn't mean a 1,000-gallon tank in the backyard. Plenty of fuel is anywhere between 12 to 20 gallons of propane, or gasoline, or whatever fuel of your choice. If you've got a solar generator, that works too. I generally recommend a propane generator because propane doesn't go bad nearly as fast as gasoline. It can last for years. So like 20 gallons of propane is like 5 bottles. If you don't have room for that, just go for like 12, and that's like 3 bottles. And that'll get you through pretty much what you need to. When you're using your generator, make sure you don't overtax it. You need to make sure that fuel lasts, because you may not be able to get any more. So, like, when you're running a generator, run the stuff that's important. Like, run just the refrigerator or the freezer. Just run that. Run the stuff that you need. Don't try to run a central AC unit. Don't do that. There are some people that did do that, and they were constantly buying, like, just bottles and bottles of the stuff. Make sure you have just some batteries laying around. And once again, if you use them in one disaster, replace them at some point. Make sure you have a little more food than you need, and have some food that doesn't need to be cooked or necessarily preserved. I don't mean like whole slabs of salt beef, but have some canned food that you can get to. Make sure you have like some peanut butter. If you've got a peanut butter allergy, I don't know what to tell you. Get some vegan peanut butter or some shit. But have something that doesn't have to be cooked, but will have a good protein content so you can have something to eat. Make sure you have like a bag or two of ice just sitting around in the freezer, because you may need it. And really just, if you can bug out, do after a certain period of time. Now, if you're trapped there, well, then just ration as best you can. But it's prepping, not hoarding. You don't need pallets and pallets of food, because even if there was some kind of disaster that meant that civilization collapsed, civilization will eventually rebuild, because there's so much shit around here. I do recommend looking up the YouTube content creator Isaac Arthur, and he goes into detail of like how if there was some kind of civilization calamity, that humans would be able to rebuild pretty fast due to all of the modern day technology that's laying around that isn't just going to decay in 6 months. So yeah, let's see, what else was I going to talk about? Warhammer Fantasy. Moving on from real world stuff to fun stuff. Warhammer Fantasy. I'm going to do a video on Warhammer Fantasy in a couple of months. I've already started working on it, rereading some of the books. Warhammer Fantasy predates Warhammer 40k by a number of years. In fact, Warhammer 40k is basically a spin-off of Warhammer Fantasy. I think Warhammer Fantasy is a bit better. It's a little more well thought out. But Warhammer Fantasy is a tabletop war game that is different from 40k. As near as I understand it, Warhammer Fantasy has you controlling vast armies, whereas 40k is more of a squad level sort of thing. I've never played either one. I never had any real desire to play a tabletop war game. It's just not my thing. I tried playing a tabletop RPG once, and I thought it was boring as fuck. So yeah, Warhammer Fantasy though is a really fun universe. A fan actually introduced it to me. You can actually go back and look at those early vlogs of mine where I talk about Gotrek and Felix, the first fantasy book I would read as an adult. The first fantasy book I ever read, though, I think was probably Harry Potter. I know that's something that is beloved by so many people. It's like, it's my childhood! But it was my childhood, too. I was the right age to read it, and I didn't like it very much. I read up to, like, Goblet of Fire or some shit, and, that was it. I was done. I never liked Harry Potter, and I still don't. He's just some dweeby little bastard. I'd rather read a book about, a fucking German poet and a dude with a big ass axe. That sounds a lot cooler than some dweeby little guy that's going Carponum or something with his wand. Or flying around on a broomstick playing soccer. I'm pissing off the Harry Potter fans. Hey, you know what? People talk shit about Star Wars, Star Trek, and everything I like. So screw you, Harry Potter fans. Go read Might Immortal. But anyway, Warhammer Fantasy, I'm going to do a reader's guide on that. I'm actually reading a Warhammer Fantasy book that I hadn't read before. I've read a lot of the series, but not all of it. And so I'm actually going and reading some stuff I hadn't read. Ulrika the Vampire. It's a trilogy of books written by Nathan Long, who also wrote some Gotrek and Felix books as well. And Ulrika was a side character, supporting character, in the early Gotrek and Felix books. She shows up in book 3 and is Felix's girlfriend. Eventually, she gets bitten by a vampire, and she has to deal with the aftermath of that. And it's pretty good. I mean, there's a little bit of repetitiveness in it, but man, it's really compelling. I gotta tell you, books from the early 2000s were truly some of the best. And I'm not just saying that because of nostalgia. I'm saying that because I've read a lot of books, both back then and today. Today, books are so inefficiently written. Like, it takes them forever to get anywhere. Whereas back in the early 2000s, late 90s, like, they hurried it up. They didn't waste time describing somebody's dress. Like, when you consider Gotrek and Felix Book 3, Demon Slayer, the main plot of that book is our heroes hitch a ride on an oil-fired airship, and they fly it into hell. And the plot begins and ends. I cannot tell you how few books in this grave new world of ours begin and end. It's just, that's one thing I just don't like. And also modern books focus on like maybe 2 characters. Whereas back then, they had a bunch of characters, and they did so much with them in so little pages. Like, Gotrek and Felix Book 3 has so many characters in it, but it's only like 400 pages. That's it. They did not waste your time. I read a book recently. It was some kind of steampunk bullshit, and I thought it was alright, but it didn't have a beginning. It had a beginning, but it didn't have an ending. And, like, it was written in, like, 2015, and it didn't get a sequel until 2023, and that book didn't end either. And it had like one character, or maybe more than one character, but the characters weren't even that entertaining anyway. Finding a good book today is so difficult, but man, back in the early 2000s, they were just knocking them out. And like Warhammer Fantasy, it was usually trilogies. You get these omnibuses, and each book would be pretty much standalone, and it would usually culminate in that 3rd book. And they just got them out fast within just a couple of years. Same way with 40K. It's just sad, man, just sad. So let's see, last thing I want to talk about is Fallout 3. Yeah, I've been playing some Fallout 3. That is a game that's often forgotten about. Like Fallout New Vegas was just so good, which is kind of funny. You can still find a vlog on the channel of me kind of saying that Fallout New Vegas is kind of boring. Oh yeah, I thought it was boring. I didn't really appreciate it though. I guess the thing was, back in those old days, back around 2013 I think, when I first played Fallout New Vegas, I expected it to be a lot more like Oblivion or Skyrim. Where, you just kind of wander into a cave, fight some enemies, and that'd be it. Whereas Fallout New Vegas has that, but it has a much more narrative focus to it, and thus makes it a lot better. But Fallout 3 is kind of a fusion between Fallout New Vegas and Oblivion, which Skyrim wouldn't have been out by the time Fallout 3 came out. Because, like, in Fallout 3, the narrative is much less important in places, and the plot is very simple compared to New Vegas. But it's also a game where you can just run in there and you can go into, like, the super duper mart and shoot, raiders, and that's it. It's like, and it has its place. For me, Fallout 3 is still a very good game. Not as good as New Vegas, but not a terrible piece of crap either. Especially with mods. If you ever played Fallout 3, I do recommend playing it. Old school Fallout fans do not like Fallout 3 because it does change a lot of the lore. But then Fallout 4 did that too and did it worse. But Fallout 3 is the first Fallout game I ever played. I hadn't even heard of the series when I played Fallout 3. So every time I say, why would you play the 3rd game? It's like, well, I did it, okay? But thankfully, Fallout 3 does not follow on from Fallout 2. It's like set in its own thing. So there's that. Like, why would you play Mass Effect 3? I mean, that does follow on from Mass Effect 1 and 2. And if you actually jump into that without having a previous save, it gives you all the bad choices. But anyway, Fallout 3 is still a good game. I still remember picking it up back in 2008. Went to the local Target, which is still there. And I'd never heard of Fallout. I jumped into that, and it's like, well, it's not as good as Mass Effect, but it is still pretty good. I'm going to do a full video on that next year. There's already a small video of it on the channel. I do recommend taking a look at that. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, power outages, attempted presidential assassinations, Fallout 3, Warhammer Fantasy. Where will this year go? Who knows? Also, damn it. Also, Fortnite shotgun. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but here it is. It's made out of rubber. I like that because I had a prop phaser rifle, and I had a sling on it, and that sling, the sling bar snapped, nosedive right in the ground, broke into about 1,000 pieces. This, you can drop it on the ground all you want. That's why I like it. Alright, I'm General Lotz. I'm wishing you good Ulrich the Vampire, and good Fallout 3, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.